This is MTG Burgeoning, and in this video we are going to update and upgrade our Eligeth, Crossroads Augur, and Sakashima of the Thousand Faces partner Mono Blue EDH deck. Thank you for joining us for another installment of the Up and Up series. Here we have Eligeth and Sakashima one more time. After this update and upgrade, the 98 of this build should meet our expectations and become a full-fledged mono blue control spell-slinging build, as I suppose most mono blue decks should be. In this video, you can expect to see a few more card-drawing spells added, and a way in which to better streamline our mana base. Let's begin with those spells that are going to draw us some more cards, and we're going to begin things with a copy of Tolarian Winds. 1 in a blue mana at instant speed, we discard our hand, and then we draw that many cards. Drawing the many cards, it could end up being a very, very large amount of cards, because in this build we have a lot of ways to get cards into our hand, and we have a lot of ways to make sure that we don't discard those cards down to 7 at the end of our turn. So Tolarian Winds could be one of those sneaky good cards to get a bunch of cards out of our hand and see some fresh ones at the same time. Next up, we have a copy of Pull from Tomorrow. X and 2 blue, we draw X cards, and then we discard a card. And after that, our last card drawing spell that's going in, it is Occult Epiphany. X and a blue mana, we draw X cards and then discard X cards. So this is more of a looting card. This is more of a looting card than a card drawing card. Looting card, let's say this is more of a looting spell than a card drawing spell. That sounds better. And we also create a 1/1 white spirit creature token with flying for each card type among cards discarded this way. So this is what Tolarian Winds does in reverse. Not really, because we have to discard our entire hand, and that's more of a rummage effect than it is a true looting effect. So let's strike that from the record, and let's just say Occult Epiphany is a way in which we can put a decent number of 1/1 blocking flying creatures, just in case if our opponents have any malice in their hearts and are sending their creatures towards us in combat, we can chump block them down as a way in which to preserve our life total, and at the same time we can get some fresh cards in our hand, discard some cards. As long as we're discarding numerous card types, we should be able to create a solid number of those 1/1 flying spirits. All right, Occult Epiphany. All right, next up, we're going to start talking about our mana base. We're going to look at some ways in which to accelerate it. We're going to look at some ways in which to reduce the cost of our spells. And we're going to find a way in which to make our mana even more generous, at least for a turn. Let's start off with 1 copy of High Tide. Instant speed until end of turn. Whenever a player taps an island for mana, that player adds an additional blue to their mana pool. Yes, this is a card that could help out our opponents if they're playing with islands, but it's going to help us so much more, particularly with our snow-covered islands. If we be so fortunate to have our copy of Extraplanar Lens in play with our snow-covered island exiled to it, then each island we tap during that time when we cast High Tide is going to give us 3 blue mana instead of 2. All right, after High Tide, we're going to reduce all of our blue spells that we cast by 1 by including a copy of Sapphire Medallion. Our blue spells cost one less to play. And when we have Eligeth on our side of the battlefield, if you look at the 98 of this deck by clicking in the link in the description below, you're going to see how many of those spells go from 1 generic mana and 1 blue mana to just 1 blue mana that will end up allowing us to draw a net of 3 cards each time we cast them with Sapphire Medallion and Eligeth on our side of the battlefield. All right, next we're going to put in a nice little artifact here. It's a mana rock. It's a blue one. While it's blue in this deck, it's Arcane Signet. Tap to add 1 mana of any color of our commander's color identity. So pretty much this is just going to come into play and tap for 1 blue mana. It's only a CMC of 2. It doesn't come into play tapped. It is a very solid mana rock in any commander deck, even in your monocolor builds. Next up, we have Otawara Soaring City. This is a legendary land that comes into play. Thank you, Wizards, untapped if we need it, and we can tap it for a blue mana, but it also has the channel ability, which allows us to pay 3 generic mana and a blue, discard this card, and then we can return target artifact, creature, enchantment, or planeswalker to its owner's hand. This bounce effect could be the difference between preserving our life total for one more turn, which then in turn could lead us to our game-ending combo. And of course, this ability costs 1 less to activate for each legendary creature we control. And as long as we have both of our commanders on our side of the battlefield, well, that's at least 2 colorless mana. That's going to allow us to come right off of the activation cost of that card. Next up, we have another land going in. It is Mystic Sanctuary. It's an island. It taps for a blue. It comes into play tapped unless we control 3 or more other islands. So there might be times where this bad boy comes into play tapped because we just don't have enough islands on our side of the battlefield. It is possible, so hopefully that won't be a problem. That's something for us to monitor in the future. We don't want to have our lands coming into play tapped, and if Mystic Sanctuary ends up doing that more often than not, it's going to come out of this deck very, very quickly. When Mystic Sanctuary enters the battlefield untapped, we may put targeted instant or sorcery card from our graveyard on top of our library. That recursion, that recursive effect is enough of a reward to risk the potential of that coming into play tapped, but we'll see how it goes. And the last 3 cards going in are all mana rocks that cost 0 mana and are going to act as a surrogate land that we put into play as opposed to actually having a land to play. And that's going to be Mox Opal, Lotus Petal, and Chrome Mox. Mox Opal will tap to give us 1 mana of any color we want, but we can only activate it if we control 3 or more artifacts. That is the Metalcraft ability. Lotus Petal is going to be a one-time use. We're going to tap it, we're going to sacrifice it, we'll add 1 mana of any color to our mana pool. And when Chrome Mox comes into play through its imprint ability, we may exile a non-artifact, non-land card from our hand, and then we tap it to add 1 mana of the exile card's color, which, let's face it, it's going to be blue. The purposes of putting these mana rocks in allows us to ramp up our mana more quickly as opposed to sitting back and waiting for a land to be played. We're in mono blue, so those rocks are going to help us to get our mana fixed much more quickly. Not really fixed, but ramped up because we're only playing mono blue. So with those cards going in very quickly, here are the cards that are coming out. We're taking the Netherese Puzzle Ward. That's going to come out. The D4 Scrying X is just not enough for us anymore. As you can see, all of the changes that we've made so far with this deck, it's just not good enough anymore. The same thing with Diviner's Portent. There was a time I thought this was one of the best cards in the 98. No longer. It is not. It is just not enough of a return on our mana investment. Same can be said for Behold the Multiverse. Just too much. We're only going to get 4 cards out of 4 total mana, and that's even if we cast it and if we foretell it. It's just not enough. 1 card per 1 mana is not enough. Mystic Redaction, too slow. We're not scrying 1 until we get to the beginning of our upkeep. It's just too slow. Same thing with Retreat to Coral Helm. We're only scrying whenever we play a land. It's too slow. And Graven Lore is going to come out because the snow-covered mana is taking a little bit of a hit by taking out 5 snow-covered lands in order to accommodate the other lands going in and the 0 casting cost mana rocks. This is MTG Burgeoning. And after that brief moment of pausing, this is still MTG Burgeoning, and I thought I had run out of filming room, but we have a few moments left. So there you have it, another updating and upgrading of the 98 of our Eligeth and Sakashima deck. Let me know your thoughts about these changes in the comment section below. This is MTG Burgeoning, your channel for all things magic.